I was planning the webinar, I thought that since there are a lot of things also happening in France, and especially when it comes to prison management and also rehabilitation approaches, I thought it might be a good idea to actually have some context on what's happened in the past years and what's the current approaches. So first of all, to give some general context, really the past decade has seen a growing number of both individuals incarcerated for terrorism offenses, which are in France designated as TIS, so Islamist terrorists, as well as DCSR, which are individuals incarcerated under general law, so not for terrorism offenses, but still considered radicalized. And in addition, I would like to mention that from 2013, 2014, really France has started to adopt a new policy of prevention, kind of going away from that purely repressive approach with police and intelligence measures, and rather trying to more and more combining social and security logic at the same time. And also in the prison context, there have been increased efforts to deal with radicalized inmates and tending towards more of a separation of radicalized inmates in the prison system. Also important to note that since 2015, again, there is a even more growing number of terrorist convicts. So not only individuals considered radicalized in prison, putting a pressure on an already overloaded prison system. And this, of course, led to a series of attacks in prison since 2016, creating also an alert on how to deal with this specific population. In terms of number, just to give you an idea, as of March 2023, there are about 1,600 individuals followed, around 1,100 in closed detention, and then open detention, about 500 radicalized offenders released on probation. So still a quite significant number of individuals. Also in terms of context, it's of course important to mention the context of terrorist attacks, starting famously with those in January and November 2015, with a lot of damage on also the French society and policy sphere, actors dealing with terrorism, and in this context, really seeing an increase in prosecution of terrorism-related offenses, not only individuals involved in these attacks, but also individuals that have been left to Syria and Iraq, returned, or individuals who have been prevented from traveling, but still radicalized and staying in France. Also, and this is in terms of the topic of today's webinar, what really also provided a kind of shift in understanding of risk was a failed attack by a group of women in Paris in 2016, described as the attack of the bonbon de gaz, because there were gas canisters used. Fortunately, the attack was not successful, but it really did provide, among other factors, a shift in understanding from security and other actors, the potential security risk emanating from women as well. Let me then speak about the actual approaches to prison management that have been developed in France. I think it's really important to understand that in the past decade, the prison administration, among other actors, but this is the focus of our webinar, the prison administration in France really has been trying out different approaches, different measures, different kind of structures and so on, really trying to find an adequate response to the really big challenge that they are facing with terrorist-related offenders in the prison system. So what has emerged in the past years is basically this kind of structure. So the individuals that I have mentioned, so either convicted for terrorism offenses or considered radicalized, but convicted for other kind of offenses, can be directed to evaluation units, the QER. And there they undergo a evaluation process, a risk assessment process of around 15 weeks. Really to try to understand that the risk they pose and to decide the adequate measures. This means that they can be directed to 3 different options. On the bottom, you see the isolation option. So individuals that are considered as the most dangerous ones, those who are actively recruiting others, and those who are considered as not really open to any kind of intervention are directed into isolation. One example, for example, is Salah Abdeslam. He didn't go through an evaluation as far as I know, but he would be one of the offenders who is placed in isolation. The other option you can see on above is they can be directed towards regular detention. So that would be individuals who are considered much less of a risk, not actively recruiting others, of course, but still not in the need of a very targeted intervention. But they can, of course, benefit from intense internal CVE offers within regular detention, so-called PPRV programs. And this is also used to gather intelligence on their behavior in the prison system. And then last but not least, the third option is to direct individuals to specific CVE units. So again, separated from the regular prison population, the so-called QPR, which can be translated as units for the prevention of radicalization. And this is really for individuals who are considered open for some kind of intervention. Some of them might be trying to recruit others, but they're not as considered as dangerous as those sent to isolation. These evaluation units have been established for 4 years. There are 6 of them, all in France. And very interesting is that in 2022, an evaluation unit also for female offenders has been opened. But as you see, there's still there's less experience on female offenders. This is all that's happening in the detention itself. And then after release, the prison administration has established, again, several programs. The current program is called PAIRS, which is, in addition to other probation measures, an external CVE program, CVE standing for Countering Violent Extremism, in several cities of France. I'm going to speak about that in a second. Here again, this is something that can be ordered by a judge, but there are also individuals that might, before they're going into detention but have already been charged, they can also be part of the program, but that's really a minority. After release, also just to mention, there are of course also administrative measures. So anybody who's not directed to a CVE program after release can of course be followed by police and intelligence, to keep track of them. So really the prison management has been focusing on this kind of targeted separation. And also the focus really has been building up the quality of their staff, building up the capacity of prison staff to dealing with this kind of population. As I mentioned, one of the 3 options of the evaluation is the QPR, so this unit for the prevention of radicalization. And 7 of these units have opened since 2016. Here again, with a slight delay, there has also been open QPRs for female offenders since 2021. Interestingly, considering the terrorist offender population, or those considered radicalized as of 2023, 113 participants have gone through such a unit, which I don't find a lot. But here, of course, we have to remember that there's also a kind of backlog in terms of they have to go through the evaluation. Some are going through the program several times because it's a program of 6 months, but it can be repeated. So individuals can, after 6 months, be sent to go through the program again up to 3 times. It's a multi-professional program, multidisciplinary approaches. You have around 30 interviews. Interestingly, mostly female staff doing the interviews, lots of workshops, offers with sports, even cooking classes, and the participation to all this kind of program is non-obligatory. This is also something that has changed within the prison system. There have been programs not very successful that were having another approach, and This, however, can be a challenge because a quarter of the 18 detained in a specific QPR in Lille have actually refused any kind of participation. So here again, the question is how to deal with those who are refusing to engage with the program. I also found it interesting that one individual had shared his experience that he had undergone first 6 months, had really participated in everything, but at the end he was evaluated in such a manner that he was sent to do the program again. And in the next 6 months, he said he refused any kind of participation because he found the decision unfair. And this leads me to some of the challenges. Really, what's reported from this unit is that they still have extreme security constraints, often talked about as a prison inside a prison, and also producing counterproductive effects. There's a lot of stuff for the individuals, and some of the measures are considered unfair, or individuals say that they are not understanding why specifically they are in these kind of units. So it can, in some cases, still be preferable than remaining in isolation, of course. For example, because you can have more visits from family. What I also mentioned, if you remember, after release, is the program PAIRS. This is something that has been established in 2018 in its current form. PAIRS stands for Individualized Support and Social Reaffiliation or Reintegration Programs. And they have been set up in four locations in France so far: the Paris region, in the north in Lille, center in Lyon, and then in south in Marseille, with the most participants in Paris region. And the objective of these programs is the disengagement from violent radicalization. So here again, also in France, we no longer focus on de-radicalization, but really the disengagement from violence. Also, the aim is to prevent the risk of progressing to violence, so preventing the risk of recidivism, and encouraging social integration, and something that in France is often referred to as civic values. And similar to the rehabilitation in prison, prison administration, and in cooperation with the probation service, has really adopted a multi-professional approach. So you have different kind of units within the program, social aspects. So, for example, helping released offenders finding a job, opening a bank account, finding accommodation, psychology, so support for mental health issues, and then anything that has to do with a more religious and cultural mediation. And I will get back to that in a second. The program in its current form, so the PAIRS program, is carried out by an NGO, the group SOS, in cooperation with the Prison Probation Office. And between 2018 and 2020, 120 participants have been going through that program. Again, most of them in Paris, and also most of them after release, meaning as part of the probation measures and obliged by a judge. I found it interesting that the most violence-oriented individuals who are released from prison are not directed to the program. So a bit like you saw in the prison management part, really there is a differentiation. Individuals that are considered not open to intervention are not directed. So this also means, in terms of success, these are potentially individuals who are more open to disengage and more open to the program. Other challenges also involve a high turnover and information exchange, and I can really highly recommend a report by Mark Hecker on that topic, who has, I think 2 years ago, provided an evaluation of PAIRS, also available in English, and I'm happy to share it with you. There's much more information on the kind of dynamic, and also putting it in a context in the French system. The main actors involved in rehabilitation in France are psychologists and social workers or educators who are in prison, often working together as so-called binôme de soutien. So really kind of two individuals from different professional backgrounds combining their expertise to work on a case, exchange, and of course also exchanging in the in the context of multi-professional commissions discussing each case and discussing what should be done with a particular individual in terms of prison management. And then, of course, like in other countries as well, probation officers, prison intelligence plays a huge role also in gathering intelligence in prison. And then I wanted to mention specifically something that has been set up in the recent years, mediators for religious facts. The prison administration has by now employed 17 of these mediators. And it's an interesting concept. I have brought you the job description in French. So they are individuals who need 3 years of superior studies on, for example, Islamic sciences. They need to have very good knowledge of Islamic civilization, of Standard Arabic, being aware of the current trends international and nationally on terrorist movements, and being able, of course, to work with this specific target group. And the reason here is really that the cooperation with other religious actors in France can be very difficult. There's a lot of mistrust and tension and so on, but still the religious factor in radicalization and disengagement processes should obviously not be underestimated. So I understand that this is really a kind of trial to see if with individuals who are not imams, but still have the kind of knowledge to question individuals might provide a positive impact. One actor shared the experience that around half of those in the prevention unit have not really a very deep understanding of, for example, Islam as a religion beyond the kind of key pillars. They don't read Arabic, so they cannot really engage with primary resources. So I think it's an interesting new staff profile. Last but not least, main challenges for the prison management in France is really getting access, of course, to individuals who are not open to interventions, but also very present in conversations is the risk of concealment or the risk of failed compliance, of missing some kind of hint. Of course, also the risk after release, especially considering that there are several hundreds of individuals that will be leaving prison in the next years and who are either terrorist convicts or considered radicalized. And of course, approaches to radicalized female offenders, just because it's a quite new target audience. And there is still, I think, a lack of understanding of the exact roles, process of radicalization, and also especially process of disengagement and very special context that is still different from male offenders. And then, as I said, just the general pressure on prison staff system. There has been quite a investment into the kind of management of terrorist offenders, but still, I think that the prison system in itself is in a very different condition than, let's say, Germany, which makes the overall detection also, I think, more challenging. And on the topic of female returnees, I can highly recommend an upcoming report that is written in the context of the project with the ICCT in The Hague by Mark Hecker, who has been very closely looking into the different units for female offenders in France. And I'm happy to share it with you once it's out. And this, I think, will be another great source to discuss the specific target group. So thank you for your attention. I look very much forward to your questions.